What up, dogs? I'm Welcome back to another GGE, a Games, Goals, and Expectations video. So, next thing we're going to be talking about is another light weapon. It's going to be the Ecu Shield. Now, the Ecu Shield is actually an interesting weapon, being that it is the only weapon, or only item, gear, the entire game that can fit in both a light and a medium slot. Now, nowadays you think, why would you want to replace a weapon slot with a shield? But as a few people have already shown, like Manny, it is actually fairly decent to actually run a shield instead of a weapon in certain situations, because you can actually I've noticed that I've used it recently, that it actually can extend the lifespan of your bot a fair decent amount, at least in the bottom half of the leagues. So I'm gonna kind of run through a few of the bots that I think would be the most effective, most fun, or ones I'm gonna have the most fun trying to use it on in the future. So go back and change robot, and then go to the store. I don't mind those other bots; those are for the retro tournaments. Alright, so I'm going to run through a few ones. I'm going to mention a few ones just by name sometimes, and some ones I will go into a little bit more detail if I think it's pertinent. Okay, so the first one I'm going to mention is actually going to be an interesting, weird choice, is the Cossack. So, the Cossack only has the one medium slot, so you would think, why would should I put a shield in there? So, back in the day, it still wouldn't have been very effective to run it, but you could run a Cossack with an Ecu Shield, and you could just run around like capping beacons, basically, so you wouldn't be able to do any damage, but you'd be able to do that. Nowadays, however, you could equip a drone on it, and you could also have a mothership. So if you're running around capping beacons and you also have a weapon that's kind of shooting for you, you wouldn't have to worry about it. You can just like run around capping beacons to charge up your mothership, and you would be able to do damage that way. Which, so nowadays, running that kind of thing would be way more effective than back in the day, where you just, as soon as your shield's down, you're gonna get boned. You're gonna get just sniped. All right, next one I'm gonna go ahead and mention is the Destrier. I am using Destriers currently right now. So this is the most recent thing I have run the Ecu Shield on, and right now technically the weapon I think is one of the best to try to use with an Ecu Shield is going to be a Punisher, for several different reasons. So you have that 10-second reload that you got to worry about on a Punisher. So while you're doing that, you probably want to try to get some cover, and if you don't have any cover nearby to get behind, it is very useful. It is very, very useful to have that shield on the side to go ahead and cover you while you're trying to get out of there, get out of whatever sticky situation you've got yourself into. Like I said, in the lower leagues, the EQs are going to definitely be, something you want to try to get as much use out of as possible. It can definitely help out a lot, especially like if you're getting sniped or whatever. You definitely that shield can take a few shots from a sniper. Just hopefully you don't get hit by like a Reaper or something, because you'll just be taken out in a couple shots. Next one I'm going to go ahead and mention is the Gepard, which is significantly better than the Destrier in a heck of a lot of ways. It's got 3 slots instead of 2, much faster. I think, and the health is obviously a little bit higher. Plus, you also have an active module on a Gepard, so you would be able to put either Deathmark or Quantum Radar or whatever you felt like you needed to be able to use on that type of whatever build you wanted, but also have an Ecu, so you have a little bit more defense when you are out there on the battlefield. All right, next is going to be the Journal Pattern. So I think a lot of people would try to run this back in the day. I think a very decent amount would be an EQ, like 3 Punishers probably. When you're out there on the field and the pattern is kind of very slow, only goes 30 kilometers right out the gate. You can make it faster, but for the most part, you have 4 light slots, which was a decent amount of firepower back when the game would have first started. but you don't have a lot of defense. You don't have any defense, and I don't even think you have. Yeah, you don't even have any active modules or anything. So, throwing a shield on a pattern, if you're going to use a pattern, is probably a pretty good idea, because you aren't going to be able to get a lot of cover out of a pattern. Once you have it out in the open, you can pretty much kiss any easy cover goodbye. So Ecu, very good idea. All right. Next one I would like to mention would be the bolt. Now, I don't think I've seen a whole lot of people running this, if at all. I might have glimpsed it maybe once or twice, but so the idea of running it on a bolt would be pretty good, because you are dashing around and it's fairly fast, so you're probably going to be trying to use it as a beacon capper, if nothing else. So putting a Ecu shield on there to give you a little bit more defense would be a pretty good idea if you're running around capping beacons and don't want to be taken out too easily. You just want to be wary of like rockets and flamethrowers and stuff like that, even though people aren't really using flamethrowers anymore, but you get my point. All right, next is going to be this old ass bot that nobody hardly uses anymore past the first few leagues. Now, this is pretty much standard. You would want to, probably the best thing you would want to do if you were going to run a Ecu on this is to run it on the left side, the left hand side. That way you still have access to be able to corner shoot with your light weapon and your heavy weapon on the right side of the bot. Next one, which would be even better than running on a Cossack, is running on a Regatka, because you would actually have a weapon to be able to fire with afterward. So if you were to supercharge a Regatka with Punishers and then an Ecu, then I feel like that could be fairly fun to try to run, because if you are jumping around there, you don't want to get sniped or anything like that. So having that Ecu on your side will definitely benefit you quite a bit. I'm not going to really mention Stalker, because it's basically just, you got stealth and whatnot. Basically just a Destroyer with stealth and much faster. Next one I am going to mention, though, is going to be the Natasha. So you have, two heavy weapons, so you have even more firepower than the Vidius. And on top of that, you also have a passive module and an active module, so you can make that way more powerful than you could make a Vidius. Will be next. All right. Pretty much the same focus as when it. Let me see. No, and then you also have Leo. You can pretty much do the same thing. I think that how many active? Okay, yeah, it has one active module, so pretty much the same difference. Just change in firepower. What's next? Where's the next one? All right, the next one I could imagine running it on would be the Griffin. So, like I say, if you're running all Punishers or something, just something that has, a decent amount of firepower in the other 3 slots, then running a Ecu shield in one of your slots would actually be a fairly decent idea, because if you are jumping around, you probably don't want to get sniped. And for the same reason, you would do the same thing on the Raven. I think you could probably run them on Strider too, just one on Strider. Same reason for the Bolt. Pretty much, because you also have 5 dashes on that one, so you could probably figure out how to run it on. Yeah, that. One that I kind of did put on the wrist was Raker, but I don't know, like, you would probably want as much firepower on the Raker as possible, so you may not want to run it on the Raker. Oh, what is next? Now, one that people have been doing forever, since pretty much since it came out, is the Hellburner. So if you're running a Hellburner, you probably want to get to your destination without being killed. And the easiest way to do that is to probably put some sort of defense on your Hellburner. So running a Ecu in that light slot is actually a fairly decent idea, because it will prevent you from being killed before you get to the person that you're trying to blow up on. Now people usually, this is one of the only bots that actually has a built-in mechanism to be able to deal damage without even having to equip actual weapons. So you could run, people would always run the Ansel and Ecu on that, so they would have as much defense as possible, be able to just basically run up on people and deal damage, which is pretty fun. You could run some other type of weapon, but Anton Eco is pretty solid. You don't even have to actually run weapons on it if you didn't want to. But yeah. What would be next? Next is going to be, I'm not sure why I put this on the one list without putting Stalker on the list, but Pursuer. So you have, the same amount of power as Gepard, but you also have the stealth and the stats are quite a bit better. It's also a tier 3 robot instead of tier 1. So you could probably try to run an Ecu on that. That way, if you just happen to have no ammo and you happen to be on ability cooldown, you could just put that shield up to try to get back behind cover and not get your butt whooped. What's next? Alright, and another one that Manny himself has actually ran is going to be the Spectre. Now, I think he probably did that with, I think he did it with Vortex, but it really depends on what weapon you want to use. But if you're using a Spectre, putting an EQ on one of the 4 of those medium weapon slots is actually a fairly decent idea, because first of all, if you're caught down in the open with no ability and no ammo, then putting up that shield will avenge you. You also got to think of people who have quantum radar, and if you see that someone has quantum radar and is aiming at you, then you can use that shield. And, just fairly decent idea. Now, of course, it is going to take away one of those meaty weapon slots, but if you know what you're doing, you can make up for the fact that you're missing one weapon technically. Plus, you will have something to deter from being sniped if someone does have quantum radar. Who was next? All right. For the same purpose as running it on a Spectre, based the Mercury, but with the added bonus that you can drop on top of somebody's head if you wanted to. But yeah, putting it probably on, you could probably put it on whatever side. I'd probably go ahead and prefer to put it on the left side, but just basically block any incoming damage so that you can just jump right on top of somebody's head would be a fairly decent tactic. All right, what is going to be next? All right, the next one is going to be tier. So the tier is definitely I wouldn't call it an outdated bot, but you definitely have to know what you're doing when you're running a tier. And I think that especially if whether or not you are actually good at running the tier or not, throwing an Ecu shield on one of those medium slots would actually be a really, really good idea, because you have to be able to know when to heal. And if your physical shield that's already built into the robot has been destroyed, the Ecu shield will really come in handy. You can also prolong how long it is going to take that physical shield to break if you use your Ecu shield properly. Alright, what's going to be next? Alright, next item on the list is going to be Typhon. I'm pretty sure that you can fit an Ecu shield into one of those. So if you're going to be, you have 3 of those slots already, and you're locking someone down, that's not important, but just throwing an Ecu shield on there, I just think would be interesting, because on top of nowadays the Typhon seems fairly easy to actually kill, so putting an Ecu shield on to prolong how long you are able to use a Typhon is, cool beans. What is next? All right. Now, one that should make a lot of sense, I guess, would be to run it on a Demeter, because it's a healing bot. So if you're going to be, running around trying to heal your teammates, probably be a good idea to try to take any damage that's incoming from enemies. So, if you don't have your ability active, you can probably block some damage from your ally by running an Ecu shield on one of those side slots. All right, what would be next? Now, I'm not entirely sure why I actually put this on the list, but I put Fenrir on the list simply because I just think that so you have, basically for the same reason I put tier on the list. So you have on the Fenrir you have an Aegis shield, but you also have a physical resistance. So if you don't have your resistance ability, or if you have your Aegis shield knocked down, then you can turn it aside and use the Ecu while you're waiting for it to like regenerate, kind of. What's next? All right. Now this one also, the next one also makes a lot of sense because you do have so much firepower already. But the Ares, so running that on in Ares would make a lot of sense because you have your retribution ability. But once you're, most people that fight against an Ares are gonna have common sense to not shoot at the shield. So if you're not shooting at the purple shield, once it comes down, people are probably going to shoot you. So it's probably in your best interest to point your shield towards whoever is aiming at you once you are done firing. That way they will not be able to shoot you, or at least for a little while. Next is going to be the Fafnir, which is pretty much for the same reason other than the fact that it's flying. So once you go up into your ability, you have that purple shield for a little while, but once it wears off, you're just stuck in the middle of the air, easily being able to snipe. So probably be in your best interest to try to point that shield towards somebody until you have good opportunities to go ahead and fly behind cover and try to regenerate your ability again to try to do it. Basically do that same thing over and over again. Excuse me. Throat's kind of dry. Alright. You gotta drink water. Alright, let me continue. What is next? Alright, I guess you could say for the same pretty much region, but running it on a Hawk. So the Hawk, especially once it's highly leveled, is incredibly hard to take out. I think when it is up in its ability and using that laser. So the shield would be mostly for the same reason as using a Fafnir. Once your ability runs out, except you drop. So if you're out in the middle, of the field, you're vulnerable. So you probably want an Ecu you want something like an Ecu to be able to defend you, so you're not getting shot by every person that's on an enemy team, especially snipers. Now I guess for the same purpose as you're using it on a Typhon, you could run it on a Leech. Pretty much the same thing. Because the obviously we give you, if you're using EQ, it gives you a little bit more time to get behind cover and recharge your ability. What's next? You can also run it on a Phantom. I'm not sure exactly what kind of situations it would be beneficial to use it. It just probably would be fun, I guess. What is next? Now Ravana could make a lot of sense too, simply because most of the time if you're going to be running Ravana, the best way to use it is going to be to put brawly weapons on it. So like burst weapons that are going to be able to get up in somebody's face, and you're using your ability, your transcendence to be able to basically phase shift, so they aren't able to shoot at you. But in the meantime, depending on what weapon you are using, you might need to get a reload after your abilities are recharging. So it might be a decent idea to throw an Ecu on one of those sides so that you can last just a little bit longer in certain situations. Now, if I were to recommend, I'd probably recommend to go ahead and put it on your right side. For some reason, I recommended putting it on the Vityuses on the left side, so that you could have maybe corner shoot with the two that are already on the left. Alright, next is going to be one that I think it would make a lot of sense, would be Kefri. So you already make the Kefri pretty tanky if you know what you're doing. So just putting a shield there instead of another light weapon, especially if you don't have good light weapons to run on the Kefri anyway. There's lots of good weapons to run on the Kefri, but if you don't have four highly leveled weapons to put on the Kefri anyway, you can go ahead and run a shield, an Ecu shield. Excuse me. All right, and there's just a few more that I'm going to mention. I'll go ahead and mention. So, as annoying as it already is to fight against one, you could run one on the Mars. Now, if you do manage to get to the Aegis shield, half the time Mars is actually not hard to take care of, but it is getting to the Aegis shield that's a problem. But just to make it a step more annoying, why don't you throw an Ecu shield on there? Probably on the right side for some reason is Ravana. Just throw an Ecu shield. I don't know. I just think it would be fun. Like, probably be fairly annoying. Like once they got through there, oh now I gotta shoot. Now I should gotta shoot Ecu shield. Well, he recharges his weapons, maybe. And for the same purpose, you could run it on a Nether, which would actually make a lot of sense because when you're running the Nether anyway, you got that force field. What makes the Nether able to survive so long is because it's always dashing, and you got to be able to consistently hit it in order to wear that force field. So if you have an Ecu shield, but you're out of dashes, and you don't want someone to be able to shoot directly at you, so you can make your force field last longer, then an Ecu would be able to extend your life that much longer at the expense of a light weapon slot. Alright. Now, next is going to be, for the same reason that you could run it on a Fafnir, you could run it on an Ophion, whichever side you decide you want to, because you already have that built-in weapon, so that's probably where the most of your damage is going to come from anyway. So sacrificing a weapon for a shield wouldn't be the worst idea, just considering the fact that once you do use your ability and you have them drop, you could be out in the open to be shot, so that turning that Ecu around to take the damage instead of your bot would be, just good tactics. And then the last robot that I'm going to mention, pretty much for the same reason, is going to be the bot that's no longer even really in the game. Where is it even at? If I can find it. Where is it at? It is in my inventory somewhere, I swear. Here it is, Golem. So, running on the Golem, probably be better to go ahead and, let me see. Yeah, probably go ahead and which one is the which? Let me just put a weapon here because I want to make sure it's, yeah, it's in the right slot. All right. Yeah, go ahead and put it in here. Pretty much for the same reason as running it on a pretty much the same reason as running it on a Vityus. The only difference being that you would be having a medium slot on this side. So maybe, I don't know if you would end up with more firepower, because if you put on the left side, you'd have it with the heavy weapon. So, it's up to you, really, depending for what you want to do. But running it on the Golem, basically, just to have, because the Golem can be very squishy, doesn't have a whole lot of defense, and doesn't have the best health pool. But, it'd just probably be pretty fun to run it on the Golem, especially if you even have a Golem, because, they do not sell them in the store anymore. It is a legendary bot, I guess, Alright. So that's going to be the last bot that I think would be interesting to try to run an Ecu shield on. So that is going to wrap up this video. Okay. Yeah. Underdog. Oh!